"You're too comfortable in your bubble, Olivia," her sister once snapped, a travel consultant content with quiet gestures, blind to the storm one simple act would unleash. That crisp morning, she faced the gilded comfort of first class, her heart stirring at another's pain. Days later, rotor blades thundered overhead, their deafening promise of recognition she never sought. Hello everyone, welcome to Unveiled Narratives. Today's story will remind you that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can echo in ways we never imagine, reaching the highest corridors of power and changing lives forever. The morning of October 15th dawned crisp and clear at Portland International Airport. Olivia James adjusted her carry-on bag as she walked through the terminal, her comfortable flats clicking softly against the polished floors. At 32, she had made a modest life for herself as a travel consultant, specializing in corporate retreats and business conferences. Her work required occasional travel, but nothing had prepared her for the assignment that was taking her halfway around the world to Sydney, Australia. The boarding announcement for Flight 847 crackled over the intercom as Olivia approached Gate C7. She clutched her boarding pass, 1A. First class, a rare luxury her company had splurged on for the 18-hour journey. The client in Sydney was important, and her boss had insisted she arrive refreshed and ready for the 3-day conference that would determine whether their small firm secured a lucrative contract with an international hospitality chain. As passengers began queuing for boarding, Olivia noticed the usual mix of business travelers and tourists. First-class passengers were called first, and she gathered her belongings, grateful for the comfortable seat that awaited her. The flight attendant, a woman named Sarah with kind eyes and graying hair, greeted her warmly as she stepped onto the aircraft. "Welcome aboard, Miss James. Your seat is just down the aisle on the left." Olivia nodded her thanks and made her way to 1A, settling into the plush leather seat that would be her home for the next 18 hours. She pulled out her tablet, intending to review her presentation notes one final time, when a commotion in the aisle caught her attention. A man was making his way slowly down the aircraft aisle, flanked by 2 airline staff members. Even from a distance, Olivia could see that he was in significant distress. His face and hands were wrapped in what appeared to be protective bandages, and he moved with the careful, painful gait of someone whose body had been through trauma. One of the staff members was carrying a small medical bag, while the other held his arm gently, guiding him toward the coach section. As they passed by her seat, Olivia caught a glimpse of the man's eyes through the gap in his bandages. They were dark brown, filled with a mixture of pain and determination that spoke of someone who had endured more than any person should have to bear. He wore civilian clothes, a simple button-down shirt and khakis, but something about his bearing. The way he held his shoulders despite his obvious discomfort suggested a military background. The group continued toward the back of the plane, and Olivia found herself unable to concentrate on her presentation. She could hear the flight attendants discussing seat arrangements, their voices carrying the professional concern of people trying to make an impossible situation work. The man needed space, they were saying. He needed to be able to move freely, to adjust his position without disturbing other passengers. But the coach section was packed, and even with the extra attention they were providing, it was clear that the cramped quarters would make his journey miserable. Sarah, the flight attendant who had greeted Olivia, approached her seat with a troubled expression. "Miss James, I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a situation. The gentleman who just passed by, he's been severely injured and is traveling for medical treatment. The coach section is completely full, and frankly, he needs more space and comfort than we can provide back there. I know this is highly irregular, but would you consider switching seats with him?" Olivia didn't hesitate. "Of course," she said, already reaching for her bag. "No question about it." Sarah's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Are you sure? It's a very long flight and coach can be quite uncomfortable for someone your size." "I'm sure," Olivia replied, standing up and gathering her belongings. "Where is he seated?" 34B middle seat, Sarah admitted with a grimace. "I know it's not ideal, but—" "It's fine," Olivia interrupted gently. "Really, let's go talk to him." They made their way to the back of the plane, where the man was attempting to settle into a seat that was clearly too small for his needs. His bandaged hands gripped the armrests as he tried to find a position that didn't aggravate his injuries. The passengers on either side of him were doing their best to be accommodating, but the situation was clearly untenable. "Sir," Sarah said softly, "this is Miss James. She's offered to switch seats with you." The man looked up, his eyes widening with surprise. I couldn't possibly, he said, his voice rough but polite. That's very kind, but I couldn't take your seat. Olivia knelt down beside his seat, bringing herself to his eye level. You're not taking anything, she said gently. I'm offering it. You need the space more than I do, and honestly, it would make me feel better knowing you're comfortable. Ma'am, I appreciate the gesture, but that's a first-class seat. Do you know how much those cost? Olivia smiled. I do, and I also know that you've already paid more than enough. Please let me do this for you. The man stared at her for a long moment as if trying to understand why a stranger would make such an offer. Around them, other passengers had begun to notice the exchange, some watching with curiosity, others with the mild impatience of people eager to get underway. But Olivia kept her attention focused on the man in front of her whose eyes had begun to glisten with unshed tears. I don't even know your name, he said finally. Olivia James, she replied. And yours? He hesitated for a moment, then said simply, you can call me Ethan. Well, Ethan, what do you say? Will you let me do this small thing? Ethan looked around the cramped coach section, then back at Olivia's earnest face. Slowly, he nodded. Thank you, he whispered. You have no idea what this means to me. The switch was accomplished quickly and efficiently, with Sarah and her colleagues ensuring that Ethan was comfortable in his new seat while Olivia settled into 34B. The middle seat was indeed cramped, wedged between a businessman who immediately claimed both armrests and a college student who fell asleep against the window before they even took off. But Olivia found that she didn't mind. Every time she glanced toward the front of the plane and saw Ethan's feet stretched out in the spacious first-class cabin, she felt a warm satisfaction that made her own discomfort seem trivial. The flight passed uneventfully. Olivia dozed fitfully, worked on her presentation, and made polite conversation with her fellow passengers. She caught glimpses of Ethan occasionally when she got up to use the restroom, noting with satisfaction that he appeared to be resting comfortably. The flight attendants checked on him frequently, and she overheard them discussing his medication schedule and dietary restrictions. It was clear that he was under serious medical care, though the nature of his injuries remained a mystery. When they landed in Sydney, Olivia waited until most of the passengers had disembarked before making her way off the plane. She had no desire to make a scene or embarrass Ethan with effusive gratitude. As she passed through the first-class cabin, she saw him gathering his belongings with the help of a flight attendant. Their eyes met briefly, and he nodded in acknowledgement, mouthing the words, "Thank you one more time." She smiled and continued on her way, thinking that would be the end of their brief encounter. The conference in Sydney was a success. Olivia's presentation went well, and her firm secured the contract they had been pursuing. She spent 3 days in meetings and site visits, then took a day to explore the city before flying back to Portland. The entire trip was a professional triumph, and she returned home feeling accomplished and optimistic about her company's future. Life quickly returned to normal. Olivia settled back into her routine of client calls, site visits, and proposal writing. She occasionally thought about Ethan, wondering how his treatment was going and whether he had recovered from whatever injuries had necessitated his trip to Australia. But as the weeks passed, the memory of their encounter began to fade into the background of her busy life. 3 weeks after her return from Sydney, Olivia was enjoying a quiet Saturday afternoon at her home in the suburbs of Portland. The house was a modest 2-bedroom ranch that she had purchased 2 years earlier, complete with a small yard and a vegetable garden that she tended with varying degrees of success. She was in her living room folding laundry while watching a cooking show when she became aware of a strange sound in the distance. At first, she thought it might be construction equipment or perhaps a motorcycle with a particularly loud engine. But as the sound grew closer, she realized it was something she had never heard in her quiet neighborhood before, the distinctive thrum of helicopter rotors. Her dog, a golden retriever named Max, began barking frantically, racing from window to window as the sound grew louder. Olivia stepped outside, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun as she scanned the sky. Other neighbors had emerged from their houses as well, all looking up with puzzled expressions. The sound was getting closer, and now she could see the aircraft approaching from the east. A large, impressive helicopter that looked nothing like the news or medical helicopters she occasionally saw passing overhead. As the helicopter drew nearer, Olivia felt her heart begin to race. There was something official about the aircraft, something that suggested government or military significance. It circled her neighborhood once, then began to descend toward the large open field behind her backyard. "Oh my God," she whispered, recognizing the distinctive green and white color scheme and the presidential seal. That's Marine One. The helicopter touched down with surprising gentleness, its rotors continuing to turn as dust and debris swirled around it. Olivia stood frozen in her backyard, acutely aware that she was wearing old jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt while the president's helicopter sat in the field behind her house. Neighbors had begun to gather along the street, many holding cell phones to record the unprecedented scene. The helicopter door opened and a man emerged, walking with a slight limp but moving with unmistakable military bearing. He was dressed in a formal army uniform, his chest decorated with numerous ribbons and medals. As he approached her backyard, Olivia realized with shock that it was Ethan, the man from the airplane, though he looked dramatically different now. His face was healed, showing only faint scars from whatever injuries he had sustained. His bearing was confident and authoritative, and she could see now what she had only sensed before. This was a man of significant rank and responsibility. Behind him, several other uniformed personnel emerged from the helicopter, along with what appeared to be Secret Service agents. The entire group made their way across the field toward Olivia's backyard, where she stood transfixed by the surreal scene unfolding before her. "Miss James," Ethan called out as he approached her fence. "I hope you don't mind the dramatic entrance. I wanted to thank you properly for what you did on that flight." Olivia found her voice at last. "Ethan, I don't understand. What is all this?" He smiled, the expression transforming his stern military features. "My name is Colonel Ethan Granger, United States Army Special Forces. I was injured during a rescue mission in Afghanistan, severe burns to my hands and face. I was traveling to Sydney for specialized treatment when I met you on that flight." "Colonel," Olivia repeated, still struggling to process what was happening, "and you're here because your kindness meant more to me than you can possibly know," Colonel Granger replied. "I was in a dark place physically and emotionally. The injuries, the pain, the way people looked at me, it was eating away at my sense of self-worth. Then you came along, a complete stranger, and showed me a level of compassion and dignity that I had forgotten existed." He paused, his eyes growing distant. "I went home after my treatment and told my wife about you. She was so moved by your story that she shared it with her sister, who happens to work in the White House. The story made its way to the President and First Lady, who were both deeply touched by what you had done." Olivia felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was hearing. "I just gave you my seat," she said weakly. "It wasn't anything special." "That's exactly what made it special," Colonel Granger replied. "You didn't know who I was, you didn't ask for recognition or expect anything in return. You just saw someone in need and helped without hesitation or fanfare. In a world that often seems consumed by selfishness and indifference, your simple act of kindness was a beacon of hope." One of the men who had emerged from the helicopter approached carrying a leather portfolio. "Miss James," Colonel Granger continued, "the President and First Lady wanted me to personally deliver this to you." He handed her an envelope bearing the presidential seal. With trembling hands, Olivia opened it to find an official invitation written on White House stationery, along with a collection of documents and vouchers. "You're invited to spend a week in Hawaii as a guest of the President and First Lady," Colonel Granger explained. "First-class accommodations, private villa, spa treatments, and every luxury imaginable. It's a small token of appreciation for the example you set." Olivia stared at the documents in her hands, unable to believe what she was reading. "I can't accept this," she said finally. "This is too much." "You can and you will," Colonel Granger said firmly. "Consider it an order from a superior officer." He smiled to soften the command. "The President specifically requested that you be treated with the same kindness and generosity that you showed to me." By now, news trucks had begun to arrive, drawn by reports of the presidential helicopter landing in a suburban neighborhood. Reporters and cameramen were setting up along the street, and Olivia could see her neighbors being interviewed, their faces animated with excitement and curiosity. "This is going to be all over the news, isn't it?" she asked with a sinking feeling. "I'm afraid so," Colonel Granger admitted. "But don't worry, we'll make sure you have privacy and protection if you need it. The story will focus on the positive message, that kindness matters, that small acts can have enormous impact, and that there are still good people in this world." As if on cue, one of the Secret Service agents approached to inform them that reporters were requesting a brief statement. Colonel Granger looked at Olivia questioningly. "I suppose I should say something," she said reluctantly, "but I don't know what to tell them." "Tell them the truth," Colonel Granger suggested, "that you saw someone in need and helped, that's all." The impromptu press conference was brief but intense. Olivia found herself facing a bank of cameras and microphones, with reporters shouting questions about her background, her motivations, and her reaction to the presidential recognition. She answered as best she could, emphasizing that she had simply done what anyone should do in such a situation. "I didn't do anything special," she insisted. "He needed help and I had a seat, that's all there was to it." But the reporters weren't satisfied with such a simple explanation. They wanted to know about her background, her family, her work. They asked about her feelings when she first saw Colonel Granger's injuries, her decision-making process, and her reaction to the presidential invitation. "I think people are making this bigger than it needs to be," Olivia said finally. "Kindness shouldn't be newsworthy, it should be normal." Colonel Granger stepped forward to address the reporters. "Miss James exemplifies the best of American values," he said. "She saw a fellow human being in distress and acted without hesitation or expectation of reward. In my experience, both in military service and in civilian life, such selfless compassion is rare and precious. She deserves recognition not just for what she did, but for who she is." The press conference concluded with Colonel Granger presenting Olivia with a special commendation from the Department of Defense, recognizing her as an honorary friend of the military for her service to a wounded veteran. The ceremony was brief but moving, with Colonel Granger saluting Olivia as cameras clicked and neighbors applauded. As the helicopter prepared to depart, Colonel Granger took Olivia aside for a final private conversation. "I want you to know," he said, "that your act of kindness came at a time when I was questioning whether the sacrifices we make in service to our country are worth it. I was bitter, angry, and losing faith in humanity. You reminded me that there are still good people in this world, people worth fighting for." Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm glad I could help," she said simply, "and I'm glad to see that you're doing better." "Much better," Colonel Granger confirmed. "The treatment in Sydney was successful, and I'm back on active duty. But more importantly, I have my faith in people restored thanks to you." As Marine One lifted off and disappeared into the afternoon sky, Olivia stood in her backyard surrounded by neighbors, reporters, and the surreal remnants of an extraordinary day. The story of her simple act of kindness would spread around the world, inspiring others to look for opportunities to help their fellow human beings. But for Olivia, the real reward wasn't the presidential recognition or the luxury vacation. It was the knowledge that she had made a difference in someone's life, that her small gesture had helped heal wounds that went deeper than any physical injury. That evening, as she sat in her quiet house with Max at her feet, Olivia reflected on the unexpected turn her life had taken. She thought about the moment on the airplane when she had seen Ethan's pain and responded with instinctive compassion. She hadn't known then that he was a decorated military officer, hadn't anticipated any recognition or reward. She had simply seen another human being in need and done what felt right. The phone rang constantly throughout the evening, reporters, friends, family members who had seen the story on the news. Everyone wanted to know how she felt, what she was thinking, what she planned to do with her newfound fame. But Olivia found herself returning again and again to the same simple truth. She had seen someone who needed help and she had helped. Everything else was just noise. As she prepared for bed that night, Olivia made a quiet resolution. The attention and recognition were flattering, but they weren't what mattered. What mattered was the reminder that every day offered opportunities to make a positive difference in someone's life. The presidential invitation and the luxury vacation were wonderful, but the real gift was the knowledge that kindness mattered, that small acts could have enormous impact, and that there was still good in the world. The next morning brought a new wave of media attention, but also something more meaningful. Letters and emails from strangers around the world, sharing their own stories of kindness received and given. Veterans wrote to thank her for showing respect to a wounded warrior. Travelers shared stories of their own encounters with compassion at 30,000 feet. Parents wrote to say they were using her story to teach their children about the importance of helping others. Thank you for listening to this story. If you like it, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to Unveiled Narratives. See you in the next story, where we'll explore how ordinary people can make extraordinary differences in the world around them.